Hello and welcome. You're listening to Village Mama, a podcast that inspires us moms to pause in the midst of our busyness, to connect with each other, and to know that we are not alone on this parenting journey. My name is Charlex, and I'm a transformation coach and mom of two, and I create e-courses for busy moms to help guide them on their journey of self-discovery. Each week, I'm sitting down with moms to talk about their journey of parenting and the lessons that they have learned. I want you to consider this your community. I want you to consider us your tribe. Come on in and relax a bit because you are always welcomed in the Village Mama. Hello, Sjoukje. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about you?
Hi, you said my name. Fantastic. That's probably what most people have the hardest time with is my name, but Sjoukje, you said it very well. My name is Sjoukje Remark. I am a mom to three. So I have an 8-year-old boy, 6-year-old girl, and a 2-year-old toddler. He's a boy. So it's busy. I happen to be a solo mom. I don't call myself a single mom because I am seeing someone, but it is a little complicated. I co-parent with my ex-husband, my older two. So my 8 and 6-year-old, I co-parent with him. And then my youngest, the 2-year-old, I solo parent. So he's with me 24/7. And his father, my partner, lives just a small 5,000 kilometers away, all the way on the West Coast in Victoria. Wow. Yes, so he's a fantastic father, but he's just at a distance. So that's kind of my life in a nutshell from a parenting perspective. And then I also am an entrepreneur. So by trade, I'm a registered massage therapist. And I own a wellness clinic in Toronto. It's called Continuum Wellness. It's at Yonge and Lawrence for those that are in the Toronto area. And I've been doing that for 12 years now. I'm coming up to the 12-year anniversary of Continuum Wellness in January. So I manage a staff of 17, and I don't do too much massage anymore. So from a business management perspective, I do a lot more of the business promotion and staff management side of things. So that's me in a nutshell.
Nice. Thank you for sharing that. And so I love the fact that you run a wellness business because I think that there's a lot of moms out there who struggle with trying to figure out how to incorporate wellness into their daily routine. You know, they're so busy. Mm-hmm. And so what have you seen in terms of the desires that moms have around wellness and what they can do to actually care for those needs that they have?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think we've come a long way as mothers, and I've definitely seen a mindset shift in terms of starting to prioritize ourselves as mothers in terms of taking care of ourselves. And you can see that reflected in the industry. You can find a lot of mom and baby classes out there now for yoga, for fitness, for play groups. And I think that's so important because it's very easy to kind of get locked up at home and a week goes by, 2 weeks goes by, and we haven't done a whole lot for ourselves. But it can vary maybe depending on the area you're in. The area that I live in is very family orientated. So it's not uncommon. Like I went for a haircut the other day and there was a mom beside me with her infant on her lap while she was getting a haircut. So I think it's much more commonplace to, still find time to take care of yourself, while baby is in tow. And I found that for myself as well is, being a solo mom with my youngest is that I still have to prioritize time for myself, even though I don't have much help or, someone to watch Gabriel. So you learn kind of how to take care of yourself along with your little one in tow. But it is still definitely important to carve time out of your day just to have complete alone time, even if it's just for 2 minutes. It's amazing what just 2 minutes can do to help rejuvenate your day, whether that's closing the door to the bathroom and brushing your teeth for 2 minutes. Whether that's, during a nap time or while the kids are quietly playing. One thing actually I found very helpful for myself is around mealtime. I don't know if you find this, but you set out the meal, everyone's sitting, and then you don't actually get to eat. You're up, down, getting water, getting this. And so I found I actually prepare my meal first. And, I eat a little bit earlier than the rest of my kids. Like they'll have maybe some snacks to nibble on, some cut up vegetables, but I'll sit down and I will take, 10 minutes to be very mindful, and I'll eat my meal in peace. And then I'll call them around the table, serve them their food, and I'll still sit with them, but then I can get up, get down, and be very attentive and mindful to them and ask them questions and hear about their day. But I've taken that time, only 10 minutes, but I get to sit and have my dinner in peace, which is amazing.
That's brilliant. And I wish I actually had known about something like that when I had little ones, because I know what that's like to be up and down and cutting food and trying to get, come on, here comes the helicopter. It's coming into your mouth wide, and when you're in those moments, you're not eating, or you're eating cold food like all the time.
Yes.
So, totally, I wish I knew that, because I totally would have done it.
Yeah. I know at first I felt guilty. I'm like, shouldn't I be feeding my kids first? And I'm like, well, I end up being hangry and cranky. I'm like, mommy needs to eat. I'm so hungry. I can't even think straight. So I figured, you know what? Why not feed myself first? So I'm not hangry. I'm not cranky and snapping at my kids, but I'm nourished. I'm fed. I can focus on my kids. Yeah, you could do the helicopter thing, because feeding, a toddler, or especially when they're not able to feed themselves, like that's a good 15, 20 minutes just feeding. So I started doing that a couple months ago, and it was a game changer. It's been great. So it's something small, and it's definitely wellness because it's nourishment. It doesn't always have to be going out for a massage, but that is amazing if you have the childcare for that, carving time out, even if it's just once a month. And I have clients that come and I'm just like, why are you here today? What brings you in for a massage? And they're like, just for some quiet, just to lay down and do nothing. And I think as a massage therapist, that's a real blessing for me, that I can serve, my clients in that way, that giving them this positive touch where they're being, loved on basically, while they just lie there and do nothing for an hour is awesome. It's one of the perks of my job for sure.
Nice. It's almost like that analogy where you go into the airplane and the stewardess says you have to put on your air mask before you put on your kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a little reminder that we need to do that as moms.
Yeah.
So as a wellness practitioner, when you first started having your kids, do you feel like you were prepared, or do you feel like there was still a learning curve for you?
So there were definitely some things that I knew about ahead of time, just being in the healthcare profession. In school as massage therapists, we learn a lot about pregnancy massage, different primary caregivers that a pregnant woman may deal with, whether that's midwifery or an OB. So I felt like I had a heads up in terms of what to expect when I was pregnant, but everyone's story and journey is so different. So even when you have this idea in your mind of how it's going to go, even when you read the books, things never quite go as you expect. Thankfully, I had a pretty decent pregnancies for all three, nothing too major, no major complications. But having my first child was definitely a huge adjustment and a huge transition, especially because at the time, my ex-husband and I decided that he would be the one that would stay home. So he ended up quitting his job, and I would be the one that would continue working and be the provider. So I had no idea that would actually be much more challenging than I could have ever imagined. So as women, we're in a society now where empowered and we're taught that, we can do all things just as good as men can do them. And I'm definitely not going to argue that point, but there's something, much deeper than that in terms of, what we're called to be as women and as mothers. So there is this, I think it's hard to explain, but this pull inside us that, I wanted to be that entrepreneur and I was proud of everything that I had accomplished. But how to balance that with being a working mother who had to literally just give control of that, to my ex-husband. And that was much more challenging than I thought. I don't know if there's any moms out there that are listening that can, relate to that. But basically, I went back to work after 3 months after having my first, and I went back to work full time. And being an owner, it's not like I worked a 9 to 5. You're always kind of working. You're always on call in a way. And it was definitely challenging to see the relationship. It was beautiful though, grow between my ex-husband and my son. But to see that at a distance and to wonder like, oh, I wonder what that's like. I don't have that same relationship because I'm the one that's working. And I would come home and, my son would want daddy over mommy. And that was a real eye-opener to see the effects of, how maybe dads must feel, when they're the providers and don't have the same relationship earlier on as the mother does with the child. It was very challenging for me. I struggled a lot with wondering if I was meant to be a mother, if I could even be a good mother, because there were times where I couldn't even, calm my child, my oldest, when he was crying. I'd have to say, okay, daddy can do this better than mommy. That was really, really challenging. So I had to make a decision, when I had my second, what that would look like. And I chose to, I know it doesn't sound like much, but I took 6 months off instead of 3, which is a long time from work and from my practice being the sole provider of the family. We had to make some, lifestyle adjustments and budget adjustments, but it's something that we agreed would be best. And I didn't go back to work full time. I went back to work part time, and that was huge. It made a huge difference. And then when I had my third, just due to the circumstances, because I was solo parenting when I had the third, is that I took a huge step back. And that was such a blessing because it caused me to really, 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 really trust God with my business, and knowing that I was putting my family ahead of my business, which sounds crazy, like, oh yeah, family first. But, when you're an entrepreneur, when you have staff relying on you, and clients and expectations, and you've risked, like, everything is at risk. So when you completely give control over to God, it's very freeing. It's also very humbling, because when I did the numbers, I was like, I'm going to be in the red after 6 months. I'm going to have to go back to work according to my numbers, but I just trusted in God. And now it's been 2.5 years now. So God is amazing. God is great. It was so hard, but so freeing just to give up control. And somehow my business is still there and it's still flourishing. And, I chose family over work. And I think God really, really honored that. It's been 2.5 years, and I'm now finding new ways that I can be part of my business that still honors my commitment with my family, and still honors my staff. And my staff have been amazing. I have the best staff. They've been so patient and gracious, through that transition. But yeah, I hope that answered your question.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
because I'm seeing your business from the outside and hearing other people talk about your business, and it's thriving. And so it's so cool to hear that part of the story because I've never heard of it, right?
Yeah.
So it's so cool to hear how you really did need to relinquish and just trust,
Yeah.
and how you've been really richly blessed through that, both in
Yeah.
your family and also in your business. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. It's nice to be able to take a step back and look and see that, because when you're in it, it's scary.
Mm-hmm. So when do you think that you began to hit that parenting stride, and how did you know that you were hitting it?
So I think I think it's constantly a learning thing. But definitely with my third, that was huge for me. Even though I was doing it alone, it was so incredibly empowering, because it was a huge contrast when I look between my first and my third. With my first, honestly, I remember when he was a year and a half, or even just maybe a year, I didn't even feel like I could go out alone with him to the store or even just to Starbucks, because what if he started crying? Could I sue them? Did I know what to do? Do I know the tricks? Does he want me? He probably wants his daddy. His daddy knows the ins and outs. I may by knowledge know what to do, but he really wants his daddy. So I was nervous just to even do things on my own with my first. With my second, it definitely got a bit better, but I still had huge support from my ex-husband. He was, he would bring her to work so I could nurse her in between clients. So there was still a lot of support and help, but I felt more empowered with her. And then, yeah, with the third, it was almost like having my first child. I was learning how to do everything on my own. And I knew I was getting my stride, because I was like, oh, I can do this. I can get up in the middle of the night and I can do this. I can go through my day being sleep deprived and I can do this. I can take him anywhere and know how to soothe him. I can do this. And it was very empowering. I mean, it was challenging. There were definitely some long sleepless nights. But yeah, I see him now. He's 2.5, and he's just got this larger than life personality, this very happy-go-lucky child. And I know, even with the circumstances, that he's so loved and is thriving and doing really, really well. And he's in daycare 2 days a week, and the caregivers there speak very highly of him. And so, yeah, I would say you kind of know that you're hitting your stride and you're doing something right when other people kind of comment or take notice. That's a great feeling. By no means am I perfect. I'm still learning as I go.
That's the
But
great thing, right? Like we all have to kind of figure it out on our own and show up in the best way we can for our kids, right? Because we're all different.
yes, absolutely.
And so what brings you joy about your children?
You know what? I'm learning to really acknowledge how different each of them are, and finding their strengths, and seeing how there's a little bit of me in each of them and a little bit of their father in each of them, and even just hints of grandma and grandpa or aunts and uncles, and seeing that they are this blended beautiful representation of two families, and also just to see how resilient they have been, and to see how much joy that they have and how much love that they have to give. I mean, I think children are some of the best teachers. They forgive easy, they forget quickly, they love hard, they find joy in the moment. And yeah, having kids really brings you back to that time where you stop and smell the flowers and enjoy the small things. So yeah, my kids bring me a lot of joy, and I'm so glad that I've found a way to make it work to experience that with them. So yeah, kids are awesome.
Oh, they are. That was sweet. So if you could go back in time, what advice would you give to the younger you?
Wow, I wish a lot of the lessons I'm learning in life are coming, in my late 30s. I'm almost 40 now. So some of those life lessons I would have loved to know maybe back in my 20s. And that would be to really be mindful of things that I felt way back in my 20s and not to ignore them. I'm a perfectionist by nature. I love things to be perfect. And when things are not, especially in my 20s, I ignored those signs, those red flags. So I think my advice to myself, if I could go back, would be not to ignore the red flags, to say, hey, you know what? Marriage isn't perfect. My managerial style is not perfect. And that's okay. But then looking at those imperfections and growing from them instead of ignoring them and not asking for help or reaching out for help or finding ways to be better. So yeah, I would say that would have been my advice to myself, is not to ignore those feelings or those red flags early on. Mm-hmm.
So one of the words that you used was perfectionism. And I think a lot of different women struggle with that. And
Mm.
so what do you think that women can do, mothers especially, to really let go of that spirit of perfectionism?
Well, for me anyway, having kids, so I had kids in my 30s, was for me almost like a cure for perfectionism.
I love it.
Having kids really, shines light on your weaknesses. It's hard to hide your weaknesses and be perfect as a parent. At least for me, being a parent really was illuminating to show that I was a perfectionist. And if I wanted to find joy and to be happy, I had to let go of a lot of things and just know that there was always tomorrow and that I could only do what I could, in one day. Definitely when I started the journey of solo parenting with my third, I had to let go of my idea of perfection for work. So having my first two allowed me to figure out how, I could still find joy and happiness not being perfect as a parent and not having a perfectly clean home and not getting everything done, which is still funny because people come over and say, how is your house so clean? I'm like, really? This is unorganized. This is me letting things go. So, maybe there's still some work in me to do, but yeah, I think if you want to find moments of joy and find happiness, being in the moment, mindfulness, being intentional with your children, it's letting go of having everything around you being perfect. And definitely no one is actually perfect. So when you let that go, it's actually very freeing. Because I think a lot of my tendencies to be perfect were actually based on what I thought others were going to think of me. So I assumed people thought I was perfect and that my business was perfect and that my marriage was perfect and that I was a perfect parent, but that was not true. Facebook is, the worst for that because people just see the best and the perfect side of you. So when my marriage fell apart, that was very humbling because that, allowed me to I was very public to show that, okay, things are not perfect. And then, with my children, it's been a learning too, knowing that not being a perfect parent and them seeing that is actually a blessing for them. Because if they see you be perfect and hide your faults, then they are going to mirror that. And they're going to think that they have to be perfect and life has to be perfect. So working through my struggles and working through my imperfections and being honest in an age-appropriate way, I think is very beneficial for my kids. And I hope that, they can see that because mommy's not perfect. They don't have to be perfect or live up to that idea of perfectionism. So they can make mistakes and learn from them and grow and maybe see those red flags way ahead of time and not hide them. So that's what I've learned about perfectionism. Hopefully that helps someone out there.
I think it will. Totally. And so what does it mean to be a mindful and intentional mother in this day and age?
Yeah, those are two hot words or keywords, I think, that, we're hearing a lot lately. And I think for some people, when they hear those words, it means they have to be meditating all the time, or that, they only have to have one thought in their head at any given time. And I think for most people, that's not a reality, and our brains don't really function that way. But I think one of the hugest things that I've learned is that if we are not good about scheduling our time, everything becomes mixed into one. And for me, being a solo parent, I do everything. So I do all the upkeep for the house. I do all the grocery shopping, the laundry. I do all the bills. I do make all the decisions, dealing with the leaky roof right now. Yay. Calling contractors, dealing with that. Plus looking after stuff for kids, plus doing the business. And it's easy to go crazy trying to manage all that. And then how can I do all that and be mindful and intentional when I have my kids? So what I found to be really helpful is to actually create like a schedule, a calendar where I intentionally put in time with my children, time for work, time for prayer, meditation, time for self-care, whether that's 30 minutes of working out, going for a walk, even if it's putting my toddler in the stroller and walking, because it's quiet. He's strapped in. I'm not thinking about him running onto the street or in the house destroying things. And really being intentional about my time, because it's so easy for me to, when I'm working, feel guilty about needing to be with my kids. Or when I'm with my kids, thinking about, oh, I still need to do this for work. I need to answer this email, or I have to do that. Or when I'm with my kids, I'm like, man, I really should be taking this time to be working out, because then I'm not taking my self-care. And all of a sudden, all the tasks in your day are always blended into one. So you're trying to multitask. You're trying to work while you're with your kids, or be with your kids while you're working and returning emails, or, thinking about, oh, I need to call that contractor. Oh, I also need to return these emails, and I need to work on that project. And then at the end of the day, you reflect, and what did you actually accomplish? Maybe you did things half as well as you could have, or only a couple things were accomplished. And then you feel guilty because the time you did spend with your kids, all you were thinking about is, I need to be working. And that's a really sucky feeling.
Yeah.
So what I've done is, created a calendar where I'm very intentional and mindful of blocking out times in my days for certain things. And that means when I'm with my kids, I know that in an hour, I'm going to be able to work. And they know that. And that, and in an hour, then you can go watch an hour of TV, or you can do your thing. And so that gives me a chance to get an hour of returning emails or doing follow-up phone calls or whatever it is that I need to do. But then I know when I'm with them for that hour, I can be very mindful and intentional of my time with them. And I don't have to think about everything that I'm doing with work, because that's coming. I'm going to have that time. That's coming up next. So that's been a lifesaver for mental clarity and my mind, and knowing at the end of the day that I spent solid time with my kids. I got some work done. Often it's not all that I want to get done, but I know that there's always tomorrow. So yeah, just really scheduling that time so you can be mindful and intentional in each block of that time that you schedule. Does that make sense?
No, it totally does. And that's exactly how I do things too.
You do?
Yeah,
Okay.
I call it my flow.
Oh, your flow.
My flow.
Nice.
Right. And yeah, even when the kids were little, I'd have a flow. So I'd have a schedule of all of the things that need to be done, including when the kids are having quiet time, the things that I need to get done for me during that time. And honestly, it's the one thing that's been consistent all these years because I realize that we all need time within the flow to be together, but we
Yeah.
also need time within our flow to be apart, or to do
Yes.
things individually, to read a book, to have quiet time. I really wanted to introduce that early to the kids and just really stick with it because then it's teaching them also to respect their own time, but also to respect mommy's time too. And so it's
Beautiful.
been really good to do that practice. So I'm totally 100% on board with that. Yeah, totally.
Oh, I wish I knew about this. Or maybe I kind of mentally knew, but I didn't realize how empowering it is once you actually put a time frame
Hmm.
and schedule out that time.
Yes. So if your kids were to come across this recording sometime in the future, or words of blessing would you like to pass on to them?
In terms of wisdom, I think the most loving thing that we can do for ourselves and for others, this is something that I've learned in my later years that I think would be so important for my kids to fully understand, would be to know what it really means to love God with all of our heart and soul and with all your mind. Because when we know and experience the depth of the love of God and the grace of God, it just naturally flows out of us, and people are blessed by that. So that'd be a huge, not just a concept, but something they could really experience and grasp. God calls us to love Him and to love our neighbor. And when we understand what that love is and to experience it from Him, it's so easy to love our neighbor. And those differences just kind of melt away. And yeah, just to really know what it's like to love our neighbor and to serve our neighbor would be a huge thing I would love to pass on to my children. And I think in terms of a blessing, when I think of a blessing, I think of it as a way to really affirm their worth and to really speak, words of truth over them. We live in a society where we're bombarded by messages every day that we're not enough, that we need to buy this, that we need that. We need this for happiness. We're not enough. So we need this product and we need this car. And we're constantly feeling like we need to live up to this certain standard that we're not worthy, that we're not enough. So a huge thing for me is to just affirm them and to know that they are worthy and that they are enough, and just to really speak into their strengths. Each one of them is different and unique and beautiful, and just to really pour into their strength and to help them to find their gifts and those strengths so they can use them, and really just bless their friendships and their plans, and to remind them that God has amazing plans for their future. And also, it seems so far away, but just to bless their future relationships, with their future spouses if they so decide to get married. So yeah, just really affirming them and their worth.
Mm-hmm. That's great. So I want to thank you for coming on and sharing your thoughts and your wisdom and your experience with the other moms out there. This is our last question. I want to know what words of advice you have for other moms who know what it's like to try to do all of those things on their own and just are feeling burnt out and like, how can I keep going? What words of advice do you have for them?
So I've definitely been there, feeling like I can't do this anymore. There are days where it's so exhausting and you just can't seem to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And I can only speak for myself and my experience, but I get this question a lot, like, Sjoukje, how do you do it? Like, how can you do it all? And the only answer I can honestly give is that I can't. I can't do it all. The only reason why I'm able to get up and do this every single day is by the strength of God Like when I think about it, I feel emotional because I look back. It's been a hard 3 to 4 years. And if it wasn't for his grace and his mercy and his strength, I don't know how I would have gotten through every single day. So for those who are listening that maybe don't know God or aren't religious or maybe have had a bad experience, like just listen to that kind of inner voice inside of you, because I think we can all relate that there's something more. Like there's a deeper purpose, and it's not just a struggle through each day alone, because I'm here in Toronto and I have no family here. Like my sister lives in South Africa with her family. My brother lives in BC. My parents live in BC. The love of my life, the father of my youngest child, the man I will one day marry, he lives 5,000 kilometers away. And, I don't have that support here. And I know if it wasn't for, really pressing into God and, asking for that supernatural strength, that there would be way more bad days than there are good days. So just really pressing into God, especially if you're someone who has a relationship with God, really, really press into that, read your Bible, dig deeper, find out what it really means to experience God's love, and just allow yourself to, release control and give control to God. And if you're not someone who understands that relationship or has an experience, that, my advice would be, don't allow yourself to fall victim to guilt, to shame, whether it be parental guilt, feeling guilty that you're doing this alone or that it didn't work out with your ex. Everything happens for a reason, and you're in this journey where you are for a reason, and you're being purposed and designed for something amazing. And everything that you go through in life, if you choose, will make you stronger. Just using every day as a way to get better, to be stronger, to push deeper in your personal development, and and not to feel bad to reach out and ask for help, because you would be surprised at how many people out there would be so happy to help you if you just kind of, leave your pride at the door and ask for help. And as we talked about earlier with perfectionism, just let that go. Let that go. As soon as you give that up, it's so freeing.
You've now reached the end of another episode of Village Mama. If you're enjoying it, I would love for you to subscribe so you don't miss any episodes, and also give it a 5-star review on iTunes. It's very much appreciated. Thank you. So until next time, keep treating yourself and others with compassion and grace. Take care.